Yeah.
Quickly.
All right, so welcome back to the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee. We're going to continue our testimony from the Agency of Digital Services today, and we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Please take us away. I think to the committee there's a second slide deck. Just want to make sure everybody has that up.
So, for the record again, for those tuning in new, Sean Nail, our Secretary, Agency Digital Services, and joining me for the second half, well, it's not a half, we used a good chunk earlier. Second portion is our AI Director, Josiah Raish. He'll be doing most of the overview today. He is our, as the Director of AI, he's leading the efforts within ADS. And if we have any time at the end, be glad to answer any questions you may have either on the first portion or what comes up here today. So we should be starting on a slide that says our approach to AI. And I'm going to turn it over to Josiah. Josiah, introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah, for the record, Josiah Raish. So I've been with the state about 7 years, started as a developer, very entry-level developer in the Agency of Transportation. And from early on in my career, was really building automations and streamlining work. So that's where my focus has been throughout my career with the state. And so the move into AI as kind of the next generation of technologies to improve people's daily work felt like a really good fit. So I wanted to just overview a little bit about our approach to AI. There's a lot in the headlines recently with ChatGPT becoming kind of broadly available. Google, Facebook each have their own version of that will be likely rolling out over the next couple of months for public use. But those kinds of systems have been around for a few years now, just not broadly available to the public. And as people have become familiar with the tools, there's been a lot of kind of speculation about the way that will change the world we live in. And I think I wanted to just ground the discussion here a little bit with the approach we're taking to implementing AI within state government. So, working definition of AI, the thing that fits in a one line in big type on a slide, computers with capabilities that appear intelligent. So traditionally, computers have been good at certain things, a lot of kind of basic math functions, some process automation, but understanding content and context and handling things in that way is really something that's been reserved for humans. And so anytime we see a computer system that's able to apply context or understanding of the content of whatever it's doing to its process, that's really, strikes us as being, well, that's AI. But also AI is in all kinds of other places that are maybe a little bit less shiny. So, we've all used Siri or Alexa. Those are AI-based tools that are doing speech recognition, even, very early AI doing character recognition to route where your envelope goes if you're mailing a letter beyond your local post office. These intelligent capabilities have been around for a while. They're blossoming and becoming a lot more capable and a lot more useful. But we're really approaching AI as it exists in the context of our human processes and systems. So we're not looking at AI as completely autonomous or to kind of offload whole swaths of work from people into robots. We're really looking at how can we use AI to improve the work that the humans are doing and work within the systems that we already have stood up, which already have things like bias detection, like fraud detection, and oversight of the decisions that are being made, and really trying to structure our AI usage in ways that are enhancing the capabilities of the people doing the work. Think of it like power tools I have at the bottom of the slide, right? It's the difference between assembling your house with a hammer and assembling it with an electric drill, right? These are tools that can make people more creative and able to do more meaningful work when they're applied appropriately, and can enable people to do much bigger and better things than they could do or more efficiently than they could do them previously. So that's the approach that we're taking as we think about AI and how we'll apply it in the state. We released, I think, 3 different reports I've worked on so far this year. The ethics policy that came out of the AI Council, which I'll talk about in a minute, covered this in a lot more detail, and happy to talk about that more if that's of interest. So jumping over to the AI Advisory Council, last year, legislature created two new bodies to work on AI within state government. I'm going to address the Advisory Council first, which is a group of 10 people. You can see the current makeup of the Advisory Council there on the slide you have on slide 3. This council it's worked really well. We have a broad, diverse set of perspectives. There's quite a few folks who have expertise in the legal aspects of the business of state government or in legal matters broadly, which is a real asset to us as we're approaching these policies and how we're going to approach doing AI, as well as people with specific business process knowledge and understanding of potential pitfalls that we want to avoid. So the mix you can see there. I'm going to jump pretty quickly to slide 4, looking at the work that the council has accomplished and is looking forward to. So the draft ethics and conflict of interest policy was due in January of this year, and we've released that. The policy is still a draft because there's a few pieces that we wanted to dive into more deeply. But we think we could probably release it as a version 1 of a real policy, and I'm working with Secretary Naylor on how we would approach that. And we plan to revisit that policy annually as the landscape around AI is really evolving rapidly. We think that that's an appropriate cadence for making adjustments. For January of 24, the council is due to present policy on AI use and data management. And so we've already just started discussions on a few of those things. And you'll see the bottom, I'll get to some of those that have impact on those 2 policies. Also, working on oversight of the work of the Division of AI, of which I'm the director. So, keeping them apprised of the pilots that we're looking into and the types of use cases we feel are appropriate to tackle first, and see where AI might fit in those. And the council is also working on educational opportunities in collaboration with other bodies. So I think Friday, there's an art show at Burlington City Arts focused on AI art. A number of us will be there. And I'm excited about, kind of seeing where the Vermont community and the broader art community are going with AI. We have a couple of open questions that I've highlighted here around the scope and authority of the council. So as we were working through the ethics policy, we've put some pretty, I think pretty good constraints around how AI can be used, and like, we don't want AI to be used in ways that infringes on the liberties of Vermonters, right, is like a really big one. We want it to further the goals of state government as defined in Vermont's constitution. So as we're thinking about how we apply that ethics policy, it's pretty clear within the state and even within the vendor community that we kind of directly procure products from, that we can just say, you need to be in compliance with this policy, and make sure we're checking and rigorously enforcing that. But it's a little bit less clear how we would apply that to vendors where we're not directly procuring their AI services, or when the vendor uses data that we've provided them in training their own AI products. So think about places where we have, say, like health insurers, where the state contracts with a health insurance provider. How can we limit the data usage there? And then also like for the feds or other government entities, how do we apply the ethics policy authority in those contexts? And Sean, were you going to make a comment here?
No, but I did want to, well, a couple things. I did, yes.
Okay.
I wanted to pause first to see if there's questions, but to also add that we have provided to the legislature 3 different documents so far this year, correct? As part of the statute. So could you touch on those to make sure that they're aware of that, what has been provided and uploaded and should be available to them if they want to research them?
Yep. So the first one, the ethics policy I've been talking about, is included in the council report that was January 15th. I think it's called the AI Advisory Council report. And it might include the word ethics policy in there somewhere. That report is up and available. We also released a preliminary AI inventory report, which is looking at all the places we know we have AI in the state currently. And so that was released. The initial version, I think, was late December. And then we have an updated version of that that's maybe a little bit less of a table, a little bit more narrative based, available in the ADS annual report.
And when you say state, we mean the executive branch, state government, not as in the state of Vermont as a whole.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah. And so before we get into more of the open questions, I just wanted to pause and to see if anyone in the room, Chair, had questions around definitions, any of the, we're getting into some meat. So I want to make sure we didn't gloss over some basics for anyone that might want to probe at that.
Yeah, so I am assuming cursory level knowledge of what artificial intelligence is out there and how it's sort of commonly used in business practices. But does anybody, I really want the committee to feel free to raise their hand and say, what in the world are you talking about? Because this is really the time. And I appreciate Secretary Naylor saying that. So Representative Waters Evans, yeah.
I have a super basic question. Can you explain to me, please, the connection between AI and data management and how it would be used?
That is awesome. That is the perfect question. And it was something that I made a note of to Josiah when we were prepping for this to make sure that if it didn't come up, we were going to address at the end. So I'm going to take the first stab at it, and then Josiah can elaborate on it. Most artificial intelligence is based on machine learning technology or neural networks. So it's they are an engine that has to be trained for the most part, right? So they've got to be fed a lot of data to train them so that they can see like many different scenarios, so that as they're getting asked questions, they have a basis to answer the question on. So moving forward, there's going to be this tight connection between data management and artificial intelligence, because one of the things that we see and we worry about is all of the data that we have is human-based data. Humans have biases. So as much as we want to think that the machine can be unbiased, it's going to carry bias as a result of what data we feed it to train it. So this was meant to tease that out, right? That's a great pickup to realize that we cannot have conversations about artificial intelligence, meaningful ones, that don't include also an understanding of how important data is. So Josiah, how did I do?
It was great. I think I can provide maybe a more concrete example. When OpenAI was training ChatGPT, the material that it consumed was basically every book in Google Books, as well as basically everything available on the public internet as of 2021, which is a lot of things, right? But they had to then spend about a year working on content filtering because there's a lot of biases in that material, right? Like if you're reading the corpus of Google Books, they tend to be much older materials, and there's a lot of assumptions in there about like doctors are guys and nurses are women. Things like that have historically been biases that is now kind of the default interpretation when the AI is reading something about doctors and trying to understand the context. Just the automatic assumption was gender-based. And so they've done some work to try to put filters in place around that and mitigate some of the fact that like things change over time, and our norms in society have shifted on that. But that kind of thing can still pop out in unexpected ways. So we aren't going to be training like baseline models like GPT here in the state, but we will be training it on our processes, and we'll be kind of fine tuning existing products that are being built by other people with state data. And as Sean pointed out, any biases that historically exist in our service delivery data, for example, or elsewhere, need to be thoughtfully approached, and then the data needs to be honed or adjusted, or the training materials need to be adjusted to make sure that the AI behaves in ways that we expect, and that there aren't surprises when it actually gets implemented, and that the outcomes that we're seeing, which I'll get to in a little bit here, the outcomes that we're seeing are aligned with the values that Vermont has.
Great question. Any others?
Not seeing any hands around the table, but
Okay.
I think this is a
That was
conversation.
fascinating nugget right there. though.
Yeah. So,
I'm into it.
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm particularly, I don't want to get in the way of your presentation, but I'm particularly interested in the specific points where we're kind of using AI tools. I think of things like all the data that we have around in like the DMV database, for instance. It's where what are we using AI for, and how is that really in the background of some of the things that Vermonters are interacting with? I think that might be some of the most interesting stuff to touch on if you.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Josiah, talk about you can sample from the inventories. I don't think we have a slide dedicated to that, but I think it would be good to talk about it, both things that are in use now, but things that maybe we've done in the past and not. So like DMV facial recognition, which is, not happening, but was an application of AI.
Yeah. So our currently, it's early days for AI. We have a few implementations out there. They fall into a couple of big buckets, and this is detailed in our report on the inventory. But like the first kind of big chunk is around like asset management. So looking at road conditions and bridge conditions and like physical assets. We have a couple of AI models in place for that, to do things like image detection for where there are signs in our roadway. So we can keep an inventory of things like stop signs. And when someone hits a stop sign, if it was out in a remote area that maybe we didn't notice right away, we can catch those things in the inventory when we do the next drive through of the right of way imagery. Another example, another class is around our monitoring, our security monitoring within ADS. So we use anomaly detection, AI systems that do anomaly detection to identify bad actors who might be trying to do stuff in our network. And this is part of the millions of events that we block each year. And then the third bucket is just around improving efficiency. So we use AI to make recommendations on again, within ADS, for an example, around like how we're provisioning resources, how big the computers we're provisioning up in the cloud are, whether they're right sized. We use AI in capabilities like that. As Sean pointed out, right, we're not looking at tools like DMV's the proposed facial recognition from some years ago. That we think is not an appropriate use of AI based on where the technology is now and based on the direction we've gotten from legislature. We are broadly trying to keep AI so that we're not giving government whole new swaths of capability. We're really, at this time, focused on enhancing the processes that we already have, improving efficiency, and ultimately trying to drive to more reliable, faster, better service delivery for Vermonters.
Because to complement the AI discussion and tie it in with the data, there's also a consent portion of it, right? And so I think one of the things that, and I'm not sure if we're going to touch on it here today, Josiah, or not, but we have to be considering how does a Vermonter consent to allow their data to be used in a way different than they thought they were doing it to be provided, right? So even though we may be sitting on terabytes of information, in the DMV environment, until we go through that process to assure that everybody knows what we would use it outside of the intent, which was, registering their vehicle, issuing their driver's license, credentialing them. That feels risky to go, that's the cart before the horse, it feels like, on that. So that's also part of what goes into this is how do we, and it doesn't only apply to government, right? But what should we be considering that would extend to businesses around if I share something about myself with a business because I think it's germane to the service I'm receiving, but then they turn around and provide it to somebody else that's used to be part of a bigger data set to participate in AI. That was not an intended use when I provided it, right? So how do we also start to figuring out consent? So that's why really data management, right, is going to be so core in such a tight linkage to AI as we move through all of these things.
We actually do have that one under consumer protections on the slide down near the bottom of the slide. I don't think we call it out explicitly as consent, but we talk about allowing users to make meaningful decisions about how their data is used. The other topic we've talked about within the council on consumer protections is, and I think, Sean, this might be an example you had brought up, if a health insurer is using data that they're sourcing from, say, Facebook or 23andMe or some other service to make decisions about the provision of services to you, do you have a right to know that that's happening and that those are being used as inputs in the decision-making process? So those are things that we're trying to think about from a council perspective, but also would love guidance from legislature on how far the council's authority and scope extends in those areas. And, if there's other work ongoing in some of those areas, we're happy to wait for the outputs of those. But these are some of the conversations we're having.
I haven't read everything that we've got in the reports in detail, but one of the questions that I want to put out there for the committee and for you to think about is how the AI conversation and this committee's jurisdiction around public records interface. For example, I'm thinking that there are lots and lots of data sets that the state has access to that a lot of companies and other actors might want to use to mine and feed in to AI, and how we, as we're updating public records law, sort of think about that and accommodate that, or protect Vermonters' privacy when data sets that used to seem pretty benign and hard to get anything from, when you can feed it into one of those engines that could have all kinds of consequences that I don't know that we've really delved into as a legislature or the council at this point.
That's a great point. And I'll bring that back to the council. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's, we've talked about how does data use agreements reflect kind of constraining to the use of what was intended. But that's a channel, right, where we don't really have that conversation usually through public records requests. It's it's a very binary response, right? If we have records and they're not for some reason withheld, we provide them, and we often don't ask the why behind the public records request. And so that's a really interesting point as a vehicle to gain access to that data. All right. You want to go on next slide, Josiah?
Sure. So that was the council. The other body that was stood up was the AI division within the Agency of Digital Services. So I'm on slide 5. And the way that ADS stood this division up was we took the existing team that I was working with and expanded it and expanded its scope. So you can see that within the AI division, we have the data and analytics side, which includes the AI development and operations components. And really, we're working, and I'll get to this on the next slide a bit, working on standing up a center to enable AI usage thoughtfully within the executive branch. We're also working on, tightly aligned to that, our next generation of data management technologies. And some of this gets back to the network items that the secretary was addressing earlier today. Making sure that we have data management capabilities and platforms that support some of these advanced use cases where we're operating on kind of much larger data sets. And then just analytics broadly. We took the experience that we gained through COVID and doing a lot of public reporting during that time and have tried to standardize that into practices and processes that we can reapply across the state. And then on the other side of the shop is our quality management unit, which is really focused on digital service delivery improvement. We're heavily involved in our public portal discussions and like our CRM platform and quality management kind of as traditionally envisioned in IT. So we actually find that the close coupling of the data management, the AI, and the quality management capabilities is providing us a lot of a different approach than we would have if we had those things separated, because we're thinking about the quality of the services up front. We are approaching how we manage data and how we work with AI a little bit differently than we would if there was a wider division between those two. So down at the bottom of this slide, there were a couple of recommendations from the inventory report that I wanted to highlight to this committee. One is that the inventory report or the inventory and the statute that created the AI division uses two different definitions of AI. One is kind of really broad and just says like any algorithm, which includes things like broadly interpreted algorithm means like spreadsheet, right? So that's like a very broad definition. There's also a narrower definition, which I think is more applicable to what we're trying to manage as the AI division. And also, there's some recommendations in there about excluding commodity AI products from the inventory. So when the key component is not an AI product and it's kind of baked into another thing that you're receiving. Think of something like Siri that's kind of ubiquitous. Not really something that we have much control over or will be doing a whole lot of monitoring of at this stage. So those commodity AI features, another one is like Grammarly, things that are baked into like the Office suite right now. We think that there's less value in kind of monitoring those tools, and we should focus our attentions on the things that we have more control over and that are being built either for us or into products that the state is really procuring for those capabilities. Also looking at systems focusing more on systems that are capable of taking independent action versus the ones that support a human taking an action. So I think a lot of people, when they think about AI, they're really talking about, they're thinking about it from a decision-making perspective. Can this AI make a decision? And really, most use cases of AI today are focused on decision-making of some type. And we'd like to think about where is the system taking independent actions that have a direct impact on Vermonters versus where is the system taking, just making recommendations to a human to actually take the action that has the impact. And then at the bottom of this, and I alluded to this earlier, focusing on outcome monitoring. So NIST and others have noted that when you look just at kind of one-time bias checks when you're implementing a system, that can leave some things to the implementation that can become problematic. So if the system that the AI is implemented into, like the human process the AI is implemented into, includes biased inputs, those can actually be magnified by the AI system, even if the system wouldn't have displayed any bad behavior prior to implementation. So there's some examples of that we can go into at another time. I know we're running close on time, so I'll stop there, I guess. And if there's things from the other slides you want to talk about, I'm happy to do that another time, or keep going as is appropriate.
So I'm thinking, so for the committee, could we extend a few minutes into the noon hour, given that we're not coming till 1:30, and just complete the slides? And I know we're going to come back to these topics, especially if we want to take up these recommendations, and we might work offline on a little bit of language to incorporate in a future bill if that seems appropriate. So why don't you go ahead and move forward, Josiah, if that makes sense, through the deck, and then we'll have you all back to talk a little bit more once we've had a chance to digest this, and a couple of us have had a chance to really dig into some of the reports and talk with you offline, if that works for the committee.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So looking at slide 6, this is the meat of what my team has been doing. So, we're a new division, so we're kind of just getting our feet under us, but this is what we're looking at for 2023, kind of the first places where we think applying the AI skills that we have would have a lot of impact. So the first one I've mentioned, building a center for enablement. And this looks like having practices and tools and just kind of the muscles to integrate AI into existing systems or procure new systems with AI capabilities in a thoughtful way. I think the ethics policy was a key piece of that. As well as the template solutions that are listed right below. So you can see there's 2 that I've listed under template solutions. There may be more as additional opportunities arise. These are the first 2 that we want to tackle. The first one is the ability to, using GPT, using other tools to have chatbots that can improve access to services, especially across languages. So we're looking at a couple of different things right now, but our vision is like, today we have lots of forms all over the place around the state. And a lot of times, if it's your first time getting to that form, or even your 3rd or 4th time getting to that form, you don't really know what all those boxes are there for. And the idea would be that we could have a chatbot assistant kind of sitting next to those forms and answering people's questions as they go through. So when you're on, box number 2, and you want to know some more context about what's intended to be supplied there, you can ask in whatever your preferred language is and get guidance back through like in real time, and not have to submit your form and then have it rejected, or have it go through a rigorous review process because you didn't know what the intention was. So that's what we're getting at with that first line. I think that's potentially a really big deal for Vermonters, and could really improve how our services work. And then in parallel to that, looking at monitoring the outcomes of where we're applying AI systems. So these chatbots, but then also other places where we have AI in place already, and as additional opportunities come up. We want to have template solutions for monitoring those outcomes and ensuring that we're not either perpetuating biases that exist today, and also that we're not getting any unexpected behaviors out of the AI systems, whether that's impacting a disadvantaged group or just broadly unexpected. We're working right now on guidelines for how people can use tools like ChatGPT safely in their work. I know I've been using it for content generation, and it's really powerful. There's a lot of opportunity there, especially since we're so document heavy, but we want people to use those tools thoughtfully. The pilots, there's a lot of different types of artificial intelligence out there. We need to understand where those can best be applied and where each one has strengths and weaknesses. So that's what that line's about. And then the last one, and we're having conversations with other states about this as well, is this is a new space. And historically, the state has relied on software vendors to build most of the software that we have. And we've had a lot of success with that. We don't currently have, just because the industry is new, there's not a big vendor community out there today of reputable, trusted vendors with skills in the AI space. And some of the vendors that we have good relationships with are kind of skilling up in that space. So that's one avenue, but we want to work with the vendor community on these projects to develop kind of standards for what does a strong AI vendor look like, and how can we integrate them into projects when we're doing these big modernization efforts, and know we're going to get a good product out. Sean, did you want to add any color to any of those, or?
No, those are good. I'm actually thinking that the last slide, the bias in AI is a pretty significant, I think, discussion starter. And I'm wondering if we should use that as a springboard for the next time we come back. I'll look to the chair's thoughts on it, because there's a lot of content just on this one slide.
Yeah, I appreciate that suggestion, and think it's a good one. I do want to let folks get a break for lunch here. We will definitely have you all back. I'm very interested to learn a little bit more about the plans for the division, and I appreciate the approach that's being taken with the council. I also think that it'll be good for us to hear Director Davis is going to be presenting to us about the language access report recommendations, along with Senate Gov.Ops next this afternoon at 1:30. And I think that there's a little bit of overlap. So when we think about things like the multilingual chatbots and language access to state services, there's overlap between these things. So Josiah, Secretary Naylor, Kate, thank you so much for spending the morning with us, and we'll definitely have you back soon.
Thank you for your time. We know this has been lengthy, but we appreciate all the great questions, and look forward to being back in person with you next time.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're breaking